Hello, and welcome to another edition of the Scenic View podcast. I'm your host, Jonathan Owens, the Communications Director here at Scenic, joined as always by the Executive Director, Artis Watkins, Government Relations Director, Suzanne Beasley, and podcast producer, Sam Klein. It's a big week of House budget talk, so let's dive right into it. That's all I heard that. Yeah, I heard that much better in my head. I'm sorry about that.
I think it went pretty well.
Okay.
I think that sounds
cool. Well, today is Thursday, May 22nd. Like I said, it is House Budget Week, from what I understand, right?
Yeah.
Quite a week for you, Suzanne.
It's been a week.
We got a whole lot to talk about, and let's just jump right in. The House passed its budget this morning, right?
It did.
Budget proposal.
It did. They were in session for a long time yesterday. There were 36 amendments. 2 of them passed. None of them had anything to do with state employees or retirees. I didn't see the vote count because I was speaking with a legislator today, so I don't know what the final vote count was today. But yesterday, about half of the Democrats voted along with the Republicans to get this passed. Just a quick reminder, it had 2.5% for most state employees in the House proposal. It had a 1% bonus for retirees in year 1, a 2% bonus for retirees in year 2. Back up a little bit, the Senate budget had $1.25 in the first year for state employees and a $3,000 bonus, but that would have been divided across the 2 years.
That's a whole lot of words. Look, neither budget did squat for
that's true.
Active employees.
Thank you,
the
Artie.
Senate did nothing for retirees. The House did next to nothing for retirees.
Thank you.
That's the way I would summarize.
So holding all else equal, I think there's a term for that. The biggest news this week coming out of that whole budget debate were the job cuts, right? The House saw what the Senate proposal did, cutting, 850 jobs?
Yeah.
And they said, hold my beer.
Right.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because, interesting maybe not being the right word, but the way they did this. So the money report doesn't have specific positions listed. It gave a monetary amount, 20%, I think the number is, that an agency has to cut in positions. So each agency is going to have to make the decisions of how many of whatever position to cut and cut until they get to that number.
What if your agency has so many critical positions and you don't have enough fluff to not cut into critical positions? Because this is more than one agency.
Yeah.
I mean, we could think of DMV off the top of our heads of one agency.
DAC.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So, like you said, it's a little murky with some of the wording.
Yeah, we don't have specifics. So if you call us, I'm not going to be able to tell you if your position or a position is. What I'm understanding is the majority of them are vacant. But like you just said, Artis, when an agency that doesn't have a lot of fluff gets to the point where they're not meeting that goal that was set from the legislature, then.
Okay, but it's bigger than they're saying, because if you have prisons with an over 60% vacancy rate in terms of employees, somebody's eventually going to die.
Yeah.
That's not an overstatement. We've seen it. We saw it at Pasquotank. We saw it at Bertie. And they were at about 32% vacancy, which then was considered extremely high.
Now it's probably 60.
The average in DAC, my understanding, is in the 30s right now. So what we used to consider 7 years ago extreme vacancies is now average. To think that things aren't going to happen, not just to the staff inside those walls, but to the offenders as well, it's naivety that is going to end up with disaster.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen it, and we talk to the people. We talk to the people who are working on the ground, and I don't think there are many days that go by that someone is not attacked in some capacity in a prison.
You just don't hear about that.
That's it. The public just doesn't hear about it, but that's something is happening somewhere in the prison system daily.
Hey, last week when we were talking to Wendell and Kathy, it became very clear that DAC and DHHS, one of the things that affects the public that the public has no idea, when you go wait forever in an emergency room and you think, oh, it's just that there's a lot of people at the emergency room. Maybe, or it might be that we've got somebody from a prison or somebody from an HHS facility. And so obviously they have to secure the perimeter of that, deal with that person first so that those folks can all get back to the job, not leaving the rest of that facility as understaffed. I know North Carolinians have no idea. That's what vacancies mean. It's not just DMV lines. You're waiting so many places that you have no idea why, and it turns
or waiting on things, or
right. Small
in
businesses.
dangers that you
Yeah.
may not even know you're in.
Yep.
You know?
Look, that was
Yeah.
interesting. I forget who the sponsor was. There was a bill about requiring the Division of Vital Records
Mhm.
to get things out within 30 days. And I'm over here like, how you going to do that when you don't have a full staff already? You know, they're struggling already to get it out in the time that they get it out. I don't know. Making it make sense is a challenge this week.
So you said that it's not a concrete number. I think the number that was kind of bandied about was 3,000
Yeah.
jobs, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Which is it's like a shocking number compared to what we usually
It is.
hear.
Yeah.
And remember, 15 years ago, we had 25% more state employees than we have now. And we had 16% less people in the state. So what the taxpayers are getting is a fraction of what they used to
Yeah.
get.
And I will say that judging by our podcast numbers last week, they were very high. We had a lot of people. That seems like a lot of people are interested in this story. So,
Well, and
you
I
know,
think it's really good to hear from the people
Yeah.
who are actually in the
Mhm.
situation. So it was great
They're
to have
the
Kathy and
experts.
Wendell.
Yeah.
yeah. So I think that was a popular episode.
Yeah.
And we'll do more things like that.
I will say I was very nervous about editing that episode.
Yeah.
I have to say, they did a great job.
They did.
Just walking into this room, not
Yeah.
doing this normally, and just telling it like it is for how
Oh,
it is
yeah.
inside the walls.
Yeah.
So go back on our feed and find that episode, listen, and please be sure to subscribe to us while you're there.
Give us a
Give us some review. Yeah, we want people to listen. But back to the job cuts. What does this mean? Like where do we go from here? I know that it goes to conference.
Yeah, so the House proposal passed this morning, so now it goes to conference. Just note that next week the legislature is taking a breather, so they'll take the week off. There won't be any votes next week. And then they're going to come back the week after and dive right into committees and start working on bills that made it through crossover. And a conference committee will be assigned to work on the budget. So
It's kind of weird though. Like it doesn't seem like there's a lot of, I don't know if animosity is the word, but like you even have some people from Stein's administration supporting some of this stuff, right? I mean,
So let's talk about that. Because, policy and the budget should not be partisan issues. Obviously, they always are. Somebody's in control, somebody's writing it. And the opposite party could just argue with everything in the budget just because to score political points, or they could try to work together in developing it. I don't know what the theory is here between either the Republicans or the Democrats. I think that, it was reported that Governor Stein went over yesterday morning, talked to the House Democratic Caucus and said, go ahead with this budget because it's basically better than the Senate's. If that's true, I don't really understand that because I don't think the Senate is going to be moved by that. In fact, the Senate had Democrats vote for their version in good numbers, considering the size of the Senate compared to the size of the House. So the strategy, I'm still struggling with there. I can tell you that it definitely left state employees, retirees, and anybody in a school who's not a teacher feeling like the Democrats who didn't write that budget it's unbelievable to anybody that they would vote with it.
Yeah.
Because remember, this budget does spend the $600 or $700 million on the opportunity scholarships, which of course is money to send your child to private school as a school choice thing instead of sending your child to the public schools. And that money can be given to anyone, no matter what your income.
Right.
How much of it you get depends on your income, but anyone's eligible, no matter what their income. So where we came at all of this from is it's fascinating that the Democrats had been so steadfastly against that, and then they voted for this budget that, among other things, included it. But where it crystallized for us is this budget, as Republicans and Democrats alike said, is being written at a time of a serious financial pressure for the state. We're still trying to recover from Helene. The last I heard, the feds are still saying they're not going to pay for as much as they originally said they were going to pay for to put Western North Carolina back together. So if the Republicans had come out this year and said, we're doing a budget with no increased spending, period. We can't do any of these things we want to do because we got to put North Carolina back together. Then that would have been a pill I think everybody could swallow because everybody's suffering equally. But that's not how it went down.
Mm-mm.
You still have these opportunity scholarships, even for rich people, in the budget. You do have decent raises for teachers, which I applaud them for doing. But if you're going to do that, you can't cherry pick groups.
Right.
And then there's been bills all session looking to spend money, and the budget ended up with a considerable amount. Suzanne, the list y'all made of expenditures in this budget is huge.
Including the one you said was for dads.
Well, I don't know if that one was
did it not get
in the budget. I didn't see that one on the list. But
Yeah, there's a mile-long list.
well, let's give some examples.
Yeah, so there are lots of things in this budget. Johnston Regional Airport, funds from the Highway Trust Fund, Winston-Salem Speedway, Purple Heart Homes. Sure, that's a wonderful organization.
Right. So there's things that are probably really good.
Yeah. Preservation of Historical Records grants. So things that are probably good, but the point is there's money being spent.
It's not
everywhere.
a bare bones budget.
No.
Right. So if we're in such a financial crisis that everybody's got to vote for this budget that cuts 3,000 more jobs to a state that's already in a vacancy crisis, but you're donating money to the Durham Bulls Miracle League field project, which I'm sure is a very worthy project,
Right.
but doesn't sound like a critical government function.
Right.
And when you look at something like DMV, which you did the video on earlier, it's so hard to get enough jobs allocated, period, right?
Well,
So when you cut these vacant jobs in 5 years, you're going to need them, and maybe you'll be able to fill them, but you won't have them.
And they're capped out, particularly at DMV. I think it's 568 employees. So the cap has to be lifted in order to hire more folks. So they did get there were some positions in the budget for that, but it's harder to get positions than it is to cut positions.
Mm-hmm.
You're just cutting into public. The public is ticked off about the places they know there's not enough people.
Yeah.
They know that they're getting bad service in terms of not what the employees do, but how there's not enough of them.
Yeah.
And DMV's the only one they really can connect. Oh, that's government. There are so many others that they don't really know why. We've been through this example. A nurse came up to me after a speech, said, I work in a hospital with newborns, and I had no idea why those newborn screening was delayed. But that's a big deal. You should know that matters. And, I'm like, yeah, we do know it matters, but the public has no idea to connect that to vacancies. So we do need to have more and more employees on to explain, look, when there's vacancies in my department, here's how it hits the public.
Yeah, this is how it affects you.
And so all of these things that are getting big money, if you add this up in the budget, probably mean a lot to specific legislators. And I'm sure they're all very altruistic things that do good work. But we either have money or we don't.
Yeah.
And if we have money, why aren't we spending it on core functions like services over anything else? Isn't the rest just gravy?
Yeah.
So again, you hear operate government like a business. If you're operating as a business, you take care of core functions first.
And government's not a business, so there's no way to run it like a business.
No, but if you're even going to pretend you are, you would take care of your
workforce.
Yeah, you'd make sure you had enough people to operate your business before you would do philanthropic stuff.
I saw that you had a minor spat with someone on Twitter this week. I was trying to get back to.
I know. I've been back into those spats lately.
Ryan Balfour?
Yeah, he works with John Locke Foundation.
So his argument was that labor shortages are not just for state government. It's across the state and country. But don't you think the government should, state government?
Well, what I was pointing out to him is, and he had a link to some information about vacancies around the country, including North Carolina, but that didn't break it down to where those vacancies are most dire. My guess is because the minimum wage in North Carolina is only $7.25. I bet a lot of those vacancies, I bet a disproportionate amount are because those wages are not enough for anybody to live on. That's my guess.
Yeah.
I don't think we have trouble hiring IT people, for instance, to the degree that we're having trouble getting people to take jobs that don't pay you enough to live. They're not going to stay in those jobs.
I think you won the battle, though, when he said that taxes are extracted by force.
Well,
I don't know exactly
what I don't know that there's ever a winner in a Twitter battle. I think, I kind of enjoyed going back and forth with him. And as a matter of fact, if he ever hears this, I think there was value to that kind of back and forth. And if he would ever want to come on the podcast, I'd love to have him because obviously he's got a lot of, his vantage point of looking at this stuff is very valuable to know because that's a lot of the public that's going to look at it that way. And hopefully our vantage point might be useful to him in his calculus of what's most useful for the economy. I think it's hard to argue that it's good for the economy to have government, which is your infrastructure, be choked out You don't want too much government. You don't want bloat and inefficiency, but you also don't want one that's been cut so much that it's not able to provide infrastructure because nobody's going to locate their business here.
Yeah.
But I think that when he said something about the taxes, state employees are taxpayers, and that does get forgotten an awful lot.
Does.
Yeah.
But again, if he'd ever like to come on, that'd be great. I think a lot more of that would be good.
Yeah.
A lot more debate.
Like honest discussion rather than just bomb throwing. Well,
Yeah.
there was some bomb throwing involved, right?
Well,
But
Twitter, that's what it's
I miss
for.
the old Twitter.
Yeah.
Yeah, I digress. Anyway, so any insight into what legislators are thinking or like which one you think will win out at the end of the day?
Well, state employees don't appear to be winning anything. Yeah, I don't know, John. Yeah.
I'm trying hard to find a silver lining here.
I think at the end of the day, there will be a budget. One of the big differences between the House and Senate was when tax cuts
Mhm.
would happen.
Yeah.
And there's been a fair amount of chatter today, too, about them going home like they've done before without a budget and then returning later. So, speculation just
happening.
abounds everywhere. And I know we're tired and punchy right now because it's just been a long week. So,
Well, hey, if they do that, it means they can't cut those 3,000 jobs, right?
yeah,
Maybe we
not
can
now.
hurry up and fill them.
Fill 'em.
Yeah, there's so much about that.
Yeah.
Why do you have all these Doge efforts and then you just cut on both sides in your budget before you've done any of
Even
it?
determine what's
Right. Indiscriminate.
inefficient.
Because it's I don't know if I can even say. It's a show. Like it's,
Oh, politics is a show.
show.
yeah.
Y'all know the show.
Anyway.
Well, unfortunately, the show affects lives.
Yeah.
So,
It does sound ridiculous when you think about it. Let's look at ways to be more efficient. But before we even do that, get rid of a bunch of things. And they might went in and looked at it and said, maybe it wasn't efficient that we got rid of all those things. Okay.
Yeah.
or will anybody die if we do this?
Yeah.
Bottom line.
It's not a
Will anybody get hurt if we do this?
It was really interesting to hear Kathy
Mhm.
and Wendell were on last week. Kathy talk about the dangers in an HHS facility. So many similarities.
But to be fair to the House budget, they specifically said under the HHS section they're not
That's
looking to
right.
cut those
That's right.
facilities. So that's good.
Yeah. And which brought up the next question, like, what are you cutting then? Like,
Yeah.
most of the jobs that there or no
I think there's a lot of
administrative type jobs.
there's been a lot of questions about HHS and some of the programs they've run
Mhm.
that, there's even been some news stories about some problems with some of the programs. My guess is in HHS, it's largely centered around that, where there's like teenagers who've had
Yeah.
programs that affected them in negative ways. And my guess is a lot of
Well,
that.
speaking of that, do you think they'll need to wait
Goodness,
until
I'm joking.
the one big beautiful bill from what we're hearing? What comes of that? I know it passed the U.S. House last night. It goes on to the Senate. It includes lots of,
Sure, that
cuts
affects
to
the money that
Medicaid
trickles down.
funding,
Yeah.
So you think they'll probably wait on to see what happens with that, or no?
We've asked all along how we really have sympathy for the General Assembly, honestly. How does, or any state, how do you write a budget not knowing what you're getting ready to have to hold expense wise that you used to rely on the federal government for? And it's going to be interesting.
So the state health plan met this week and made some changes to some of their program structures, right? Like,
Yeah, well, they haven't actually voted. They won't vote until August. But yeah, there's going to be some benefit changes, premium increases.
which they haven't voted on yet.
Yeah,
But
that comes in
I
August.
wouldn't have voted either the week the
No, that
budget
would've been
came
Yeah,
out.
so that's what I was kind of getting to. Like,
Throwing peanuts at state employees.
Yeah.
like how was the state health plan treated in the House budget?
So I just came from a retiree forum Scenic had where Treasurer Briner spoke, and he was pleased with the amount put in, frankly, by the House and Senate in terms of
Yeah.
the health plan. But I have to point out, we at Scenic are still really ticked off because in this, if you want to fact check us on this, please do look at past media articles about it. When the federal government sent billions to North Carolina for COVID, $250 million of that was supposed to go to the health plan never, ever did. And we waited and we waited and we waited. That money never went to the health plan. The health plan, the hole they're trying to fix by increasing everyone's premiums is a $500 million hole.
Mhm.
So that $250 million from COVID would have cut in half anything you've got to go ask the employees for. But the General Assembly never, ever paid that back. That's a debt the General Assembly to this day owes to the health plan, therefore to the employees and the retirees. Also, those job vacancies were reported even a couple years ago, and it's gotten a lot more money since then, but even a couple years ago, Office of State Budget and Management said that over $1 billion had been put in the reserves because of those vacancies. So state employees have been doing the job of more than one person and putting money, therefore, in the reserves this whole time. So that's money the state
Could have
owes.
reinvested in your...
Yeah, you're welcome, state of North Carolina. So that's money that was supposed to go to people doing the jobs. People have been doing the jobs of more than one person. They've not benefited at all from that money going into the reserves. They haven't even been paid the money to their health plan that the federal government sent for COVID relief. And the most obvious connection to state expenses on COVID would be the state health plan.
Yeah.
So there's so many ways in which state employees get ripped off on the fringes and have no idea. But there's an awful lot of money that's been in the state coffers simply because it didn't go to the state employees like it was supposed to.
We're having a membership appreciation / membership event out at Halifax Mall today. It's over now, but when we finished session, the lobbying team went over, just to chat with people and help out where we might be needed. And I had a conversation with a state employee while I was standing out there who was, she's going to go in the hole.
Sure.
With the premium increases.
Well, tell us a little more about those premium increases, the range.
So I have a little information they put out right after the meeting this week.
And this may be the same thing.
Yeah, that with these plan restructuring, they have a bundle payment plan, preferred provider plan. They're saying that the premium increases will be less than it previously anticipated, with some premiums only expected to go up $5 per month. So that's good news. We'll see if that happens.
Yeah,
But the general, what they handed out, though, was
like a
larger amount.
Yeah, so for 2025, the 70/30 plan, it's $25 a month. That's your premium. In 2026, there won't be the 70/30. There'll be the 80/20 standard and an 80/20 plus. The 80/20 standard, the premiums will be between $30 and $70. So
that's where
it's going to depend on salary. So yeah, some people will see it go up from $25 to $30, but somebody is going to see it go up from $25 to $70 in the 80/20 standard. The 80/20 plus, it's going to go up $70 to $100. So significant increases for the people, the low end. And
it's an appropriate time to point out, we know that the providers in this system, the doctors and the hospitals, according to the only information we have about what we pay, are paid up to, in some cases, more than 800% of Medicare reimbursement rate, which is supposedly 4 times what it takes to run a hospital with a profit. And we know, for instance, Atrium, just last week it was reported, they said their executive level pay for all of their executives went up on average 41%. That's the pay raise they got. Remember, North Carolina is the most expensive state in this nation for healthcare.
Plus Atrium get a huge tax cut with this next tax.
Yeah, so Atrium executives get this 41% pay hike, and we don't know what we're paying them from the state health plan. That's still problematic. It makes me guess they must be in that 800% or more range of reimbursement, which again would be 4 times what it takes to make a profit. I don't know. And we can't know right now because they're protected.
So looking at this structure that they released, I don't know if you've seen this or not because they posted it to their Facebook page. It looks like the new 70/30, which is called the standard plan, but it's not a 70/30. It's like 80/20 now. Will be the deductibles on that have doubled. So they're from
it's not just premiums.
3,000.
Not just premiums.
Your primary care doctor visits have gone up. All of those have gone up.
Yep.
There's no CPP anymore.
Yeah, that's being phased out, which that largely affected mental health care providers.
CPP being Clear Pricing Project, which some of y'all's physicians might have been enrolled in that. At the end of the day, it boils down to this. We were told we have no choice but to go. The General Assembly is not going to give us more money than they are. We can't go get it from them. So we have to get it somewhere. And the place we have to go get it is the members of the plan.
Because heaven forbid we ask.
But that's not true. Give us back our $250 million of COVID money and we cut it in half right there. And then go to the providers who are giving 41% raises to their executives because they've clearly got it because they're giving it to their executives.
Yeah.
But instead, we're going to go to a $35,000, $36,000 a year correctional officer who's working in an understaffed prison and their life's on the line every day. And we're going to tell them, you're going to have to pay for it because there's nothing else we can do.
Yeah, you're going to have to pay $1,500 more
Not believable.
before your insurance kicks in because that's just the way it is, right?
Hashtag reasons.
So putting all of this together, we have smaller than needed or expected raises out of all three plans. We have vacant job cuts, which those jobs need to be filled or else we're putting folks in danger. And the insurance is going up, your health care insurance. So it's a net loss all around for state employees, right?
Yeah.
And net loss for the public.
Yeah. You know why? Because those state employees aren't going to stay in that job long.
And the retraining and filling those jobs, the cost
So
is
expensive.
exorbitant.
If you can fill them, right? I mean,
Right.
which you can't because of these puny raises.
Well, and underfunded salaries, period. Even before we're talking pay raise here, the salaries are so low. There's nothing attractive
Yeah.
About state government employment right now.
Yeah, I posted your video this week of the audio from it on our podcast feed about correctional officer starting pay. And that's just a stark reminder of the issue.
Third lowest in the country. Go us.
$37,000 for starting.
So even if you look at the highest raise that's been proposed for correctional staff, which is higher than the rest of state government, it still doesn't catch you up to the other states that are our neighbor states, that are bordering states. You're still below them. And I don't know, maybe it makes you fourth lowest paid in the country. That's not the kind of thing we want to be known for. But there we are. That's what we are. And again, we're the number one costliest place to go get health care. And there's nothing, the problem with the budget is there's nothing about the budget that does anything to reverse either one of those things.
And North Carolina is not Mississippi. Like, we're a pretty vibrant state, you know? I mean, we have a strong financial well-being, right? I mean, we're one of the up-and-coming states in the country. We're 10th in population. We have a huge influx of people moving into this state. And yet we're below all the surrounding states on even that one job. I'm sure it's like that on all jobs, right?
Not just a little bit below, a lot below the neighboring states, and 12% less than local government in this state.
And that's another thing that we even talked about last week, so about people just going to their local governments instead. So it's dire times for us. So what can you do, state employees and retirees? What can we do to stand up? One thing you can do is read your scoop. We'll have a link in there for you to be able to reach out to your legislator and tell them what you think about this. What pressures are you feeling at your job? What does the vacancy rate do to you? What effect does it have on your job? And how, the dangers that you feel at your position? Have you ever thought of leaving? Maybe what keeps you in your job? Just tell them everything. And we'll have a link in our scoop and use that to quickly reach out to your folks and tell them.
Those stories are important for legislators. It puts a face to an issue.
The good, the bad, the ugly.
Yeah.
They need to know it all.
And not just the folks, the appropriations chairs. No matter who your legislator is, contact your local folks. And again, this budget is not a Republican budget. It is very much a legislator budget.
Yeah.
Republicans and Democrats voted for and applauded this budget. This is not a partisan issue. This is a policy issue. And the bottom line is every budget's about priorities, and neither party thought that you are a priority or that the taxpayer services you provide are a priority. Although there were a couple of folks we did want to mention.
Sure. I want to give a shout out to Representative Terry Brown. He spoke so eloquently on the floor, and he's always a supporter, but we appreciate the comments and the points he made about the raise is not enough. He was, concerned about that. Representative Morey, I think she spoke in a press conference.
Yes,
not on the floor.
Representative Morey from Durham.
Yeah, she always has good comments.
She pointed out that the cuts would be detrimental.
Representative Ben Moss spoke up on the floor yesterday. That, he made the point that it's not a perfect budget. Everybody's not getting what they want, and he did mention state employees are not getting what they deserve either. So, yeah, I mean, there's people on both sides. Thanks.
Not a perfect budget. That's an understatement.
Yeah. It was a very polite way of putting it.
So do you think that the political points you can score by cutting vacant jobs are worth the danger of putting people at risk at prisons and, the potential fallout that could come if there's a huge riot at a prison and folks die?
You're assuming people will connect the dots and say, oh, yeah, that riot is connected to the understaffing. I think with Pasquotank as an example, there wasn't a lot of connecting those dots other than what we were trying to do. And I know Nick Oxner, a reporter who used to be with WBTV, was definitely trying to connect those dots. But for most people, they said, what terrible people those inmates were that did that. The inmates did it because there was opportunity.
There was opportunity, yeah.
Yeah, and if you did bring it up, you would be shouted down as like, oh, it's no time to bring up politics at this time.
100%. And it's exactly the time to bring up politics. Politics caused it. Truly. I mean, it wouldn't have happened to the degree it happened. I'm not saying nobody would ever be assaulted or killed. That's ridiculous to say. But could you get as many people as they got? Absolutely not. That was clear.
Well, I mean,
the understaffing.
In Louisiana right now, they had 10 inmates.
Yeah.
Then no one said anything about staffing at that prison. I don't even know. I'm sure it's not great, right? So
everything's political now.
Oh,
you can make everything political.
I was going to say politics.
People are making music, books, everything political.
Well, I mean,
politics are in everything.
Politics is required to fund the positions. If the positions are not adequately funded, you can't get anybody to take the job. The bottom line is you can still make more money down the street at Sonic than you can in many of our prisons. So maybe something could happen to me at Sonic.
Yeah.
You never know. But it's real likely something might happen to me in a prison. So it's not just prisons, but, that's the example that's the most egregious.
It's just in my head, I see so many things on social media and these social warriors now who will post and talk about how everything is political.
Sure.
But when there is something like that happens and they don't make that connection, and that's the most important times that they need to make that connection, not when someone says one line in a book and you're like, that's political. No, you need to make the connections with the important things, not every song, book, dance.
Right.
Needs that connection made.
Yeah. Do y'all think it's always been like this, though? I don't think it has.
Yeah.
I actually don't.
Yeah, it has.
Really?
Not our first rodeo. It's just circumstances.
I don't care who's in charge. I mean, we've been through the same amount of time lobbying that Democrats were in charge that we have with Republicans in charge. And it was funny because when the Republicans came in, they were going to change all of that. And
maybe not.
I guess maybe I'm talking more about the proliferation of political speech throughout the rest of society.
Yeah. Well,
and I guess it makes it easier. Social media makes it a lot.
Yeah.
Maybe not even easier, but more prevalent, more in your face.
You have more people pointing out those connections to you.
Yeah. All right. We're off on a tangent. Are you ready for the question of the week?
Hit us.
Okay.
John's wacky weird question of the week.
Well, speaking of teachers, since we did speak a little bit about teachers, it's that time of year again. I went to my daughter's 6th grade awards day this morning, and I just wanted to give a shout out to the teachers, the bus drivers, nutrition specialists, the nurses, principals, support staff, and administrators for surviving this year with my children, and all of our children. And
I got kids now?
Well,
they all deserve a good raise. They're just not all going to get it.
Yeah. Special shout out to Miss Pinar, Miss Harrington, Mr. Pinar, and all the other 6th grade teachers at Sandley Middle School.
Yay.
But my question this week is, what is one memory you have of your high school graduation? Do you have a memory of your high school graduation?
I remember it. I remember graduating. I remember looking around wondering, what the heck is everybody crying about? Let's go to the beach,
Yeah.
Because everybody went to the beach after.
Where'd you go to high school?
I went to Garner. I'm a Garner girl.
I went to Northmore High School in Robbins, North Carolina, and our graduating class was 95 people.
Oh, wow.
So me and one of my best friends, we got a box of cigars and handed them out to everybody in our class. And everybody had to keep them hidden or we'd get like kicked out of school.
It's so funny.
But afterwards, we all like had cigars at the end. Like we weren't lighting them, but
Just fun.
I feel like you would probably get your diploma taken away these days.
Yeah.
If you did that. But that's my biggest memory
Can't
of
have
my
any
graduation.
fun anymore.
What about you, Sam? You got to remember.
Yeah,
It's like it was last week.
Where'd you go?
I graduated from Grays Creek High School in Hope Mills, North Carolina.
What year?
And 2018.
2018. Okay.
And we had our graduation at the Crown Coliseum, and that's where everyone did. So they rushed you in and out of there. If you went to a Cumberland County school, your graduation was at the Crown Coliseum. And so it'd be like, your graduation's at 9:30 in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
You got to be out by 10:30 so we can do the next one.
On the news this morning, they were talking about that, how all the Raleigh schools now graduate at was it Red Hat or somewhere?
Mm-hmm.
Not all of them.
But why do people not graduate at their school anymore? I guess it's just because
we didn't have enough space.
Yeah.
We
space.
had
they graduated on the football field.
Yeah, that's what we did too. So
we had 400 students and we would have to go to the Crown Coliseum. You only got a certain number of tickets for family members.
Like that.
It was restricted. And I remember when everyone else stood up to throw their caps, I sat there because I was very overstimulated and anxious. I did not like having that many eyes on me at all, even though it wasn't all about me. I did not like being in an area where it was the center of attention.
Yeah.
And so I just sat there in panic when everyone else stood up and threw their hats up. And one of my math teachers was sitting next to me and he was just like, "Come on, aren't you excited?" And I'm like, "No, I just want to sit here and be ignored. Please pretend that I don't exist."
That's funny that my son graduated last year and graduation is still such a big deal.
We no one was allowed to clap until the end of our ceremony because they had to get through it that fast. And we had this thing called perfect graduation, which is basically the day before you graduated, you signed a giant banner saying you're graduating that year. And if you had a perfect graduation, then they would put that banner up in the school for the next year and over the summer and stuff, which basically meant that everyone had to be quiet until the very end of the ceremony. If one person's family cheered for them when they walked across the stage.
Never happening.
Wow.
I can remember that.
You would not
see, I knew this topic would light a fire in Sam.
And we did not have a perfect graduation in my year because, of course, there was a couple families. And they also got removed. As soon as the families would get up and start cheering and screaming, you were removed. And that student did not get their diploma immediately after the graduation. And
I don't know. I don't altogether hate that. If you can't hear the next person's name, I think that's mean.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, yeah.
If you make it a quick yell.
Yeah.
But if it's a prolonged yell, that's not cool to the next person.
No, that's not. But just
they work just as hard.
Even if you got a whoop whoop, they would kick you out.
I remember even when I graduated from high school, they said, no noise, which, you might as well have been talking to a rock.
Mm-hmm.
But
I don't recall that it would
go
on and on and on and interrupt for, I don't know. I don't remember any of us being unhappy. We were glad we'd hit that mile marker in life and let's roll.
There were some families who just didn't care. As soon as they knew that they were getting kicked out, so they would go stand at the edge and just scream all they wanted and then just walk out of the building.
Man.
And it's okay, you don't care, but the students actually kind of cared about getting a perfect graduation because
I bet you really cared about
4 years. I didn't care that much.
Oh,
I don't even remember signing it. I was
I can see you really caring about that.
I wasn't going to see it.
Well, that's the thing. Yeah,
I was gone.
Why
I was never going to see it. I didn't care. But my family was we're still going to be respectful because there are other kids who care about getting a perfect graduation. But the reason I was respectful and my family was respectful is because also you didn't get your diploma that day if you did not behave.
Where did you go, artists? Where did you go to high school?
Broughton.
Oh, now where did y'all graduate?
At Broughton.
Okay.
And it was in the gym, and they still do it there. It was hotter than 18 you know what. That's what I remember. It was so oppressively hot in that gym.
I bet your class was really large, was it? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I think it was. I mean, it was a packed, you could only have a certain number of people, and it was packed, and it was just, again, it was hot. Isn't that a weird thing to be your memory?
Well, I mean, the thing that was happening to you in the moment, the biggest thing that was happening to you in the moment was that trickle of sweat running down your back.
Hoping that purple gown wasn't leaning on you.
Yeah.
I will say I did tear up a little bit at my graduation, but again, I think that's because I was anxious and overstimulated.
Now, my favorite graduation, though, was law school because they let the law school lead everybody into Kenan Stadium,
Yeah.
and they didn't do it by any kind of merit, which was awesome.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, I'll hold the sign. So I was the first person walking into Kenan Stadium
Nice.
leading the charge.
That's awesome.
Except my family later was like, you got to be kidding. Like, you're
Of
representing.
course, you're the.
Yeah. You're representing the academic integrity of the whole group. Okay. I was like, well, I was willing to hold it.
My college graduation, they had us lined up, I guess, by last name, but like also certain departments graduated in the morning, certain departments graduated in the afternoon. I was
this
social
was
science.
Yeah.
the one they do on the football field.
So
I graduated that morning, and I was just sitting next to a couple of my buddies actually from freshman year, a couple of my friends who lived on my floor, and they're just sipping from flasks the whole time. They're just like sitting there, and they're like, "You want some?"
So
The answer was no.
my college graduation is kind of now infamous because guess who our speaker was? UNC class of 2003.
I don't know.
Bill Cosby.
Oh, was it really?
Yes, he had a good speech.
I don't
but
remember
That was
who
probably a
ours was.
good speech, though.
in hindsight, it's not something you can brag about anymore, but you could at the time. That was a big deal. Bill Cosby was good.
That would have been a big deal.
I feel like NYU has the best commencement speakers, and they get to brag the most.
I just read in
Trump
the last
went
couple of
to-
days that Kermit the Frog
Oh, yeah?
is the keynote speaker at some graduation. Kermit the Frog?
I would have rather had Elizabeth Banks. She was a
I don't understand.
commencement speaker this year.
Oh.
She's great. Love her.
Well, that's our episode this week. Thanks for joining us, and good luck, Sam, putting all this together.
That's our new outro.
Bye.